Hi, thank you for joining me today. Today, we're going to be taking a look at how to become an e-marketing optimizer, or a class as we call Drip Marketing 201. My name is Jamie Whited, and I'll be running you through this training session. During this session, we are going to be taking a look at how to create a nurture campaign, including a trigger email. We're going to create a dialogue to tie to the trigger. We're going to be creating a initial drip campaign as well as a subject swap, and then we're going to be talking about some best practices and practical application as we go along. You should be able to see my screen here, and what I'd like to do is start off with a visual diagram of what we are going to be creating and how. One of the common things that people are able to do with a marketing automation solution is to take their email marketing efforts to the next level. There are many different systems that you can use as an email blasting tool, and that's where you are sending out a standard email to a large group of people. I consider that an email blast. What you can do instead is become an e-marketing optimizer where you are getting targeted messages to targeted groups with relevant information that they will hopefully take action on. A perfect example of an e-marketing optimizing campaign would be an invite for a webinar or for an event. For our particular session today, we're going to be using a webinar as our example. You can see here that if we're starting up here in this purple square, that this would be our initial invite. Within the initial invite, you will have a call to action, which is something that the person can take action on. In this example, we are going to use a dialogue or a registration form. If the person completes the call to action, which is our dialogue, they will receive a trigger confirmation. So this is one process in one line here. But we're also going to branch out and create some additional items. So if I come over here to the left, we're going to create what we call a subject swap. This is where we're sending to the same people who received the initial webinar invite, but we're only sending this people who did not engage with the first email, meaning they did not complete the form. We then carry on and we send a second subject swap to the people who do not engage with the first subject swap, again to try to entice them to take action and complete that form. Then down here we're going to say after follow-up 2, or the second subject swap, we're going to go ahead and end communication. You don't want to push people too far to increase your unsubscribe rate. You want to push them just enough to hopefully entice them, but not too far to where they fully unsubscribe. Over here to the right-hand side, we're sending a different type of follow-up. We're sending a reminder to the people who actually did take action on that campaign and sending out a reminder. So these are the touches that we're going to create on today's call. We're going to create all 4 of these campaigns. We're going to create the call to action, and then we're going to create the trigger. So let's go ahead and start by creating the trigger campaign. I start with the trigger campaign because I need the trigger to create the dialogue. And then I need the dialogue to create the branches to tie into the email invites. So I'm going to go ahead and log into my system, and I'm going to go ahead and under the Marketing tab, I'm going to go ahead and create a drip campaign. Now I could technically come to triggers, but a lot of times with the drip, you want to see everything all in the same place. So I'm going to come to Marketing, and I'm going to come to Drips. You can add in a new folder here for organization. I'm simply going to create New in the upper right-hand corner. Now when I click on New, this is creating the first touch up here, but I don't want to go too far with it yet. I'm just going to create a placeholder for it so that I can create my trigger. So I'm going to come here. I am a big fan of dates, so I'm going to put in today's date and put in initial drip training. Again, I'm not going to do much else here right now, so I'm going to go ahead and hit Save and Return. And when I hit Save and Return, it takes me to the sub-menu where you can see we have our drip campaign panel, we have our follow-up panel, and we have our trigger panel. And this is why I created the drip first, so that I can go ahead and get access to tie the trigger directly to the drip. Over to the right-hand side, I'm going to click on New, and we're going to go ahead and enter a trigger name. I tend to keep my naming conventions for my campaign names very similar throughout the whole campaign so that they are easily identifiable. So again, I'm sticking with the date. I'm going to call this one my training confirmation. You can name it anything that you choose. If you're a newer customer, or even if you're an older customer, I would highly recommend coming up with some sort of naming convention so that you can have a standard format for each of your campaigns. It will make things much easier for you as you go and you grow and send out more and more campaigns. The campaign name does not render to the end user or the recipient. It's simply for your organization only. You can then put in a subject line. I'm going to type in "Thank you for registering," who it's coming from. The date and time are null and void on a trigger campaign because it's going to go out whenever the action is completed. Again, our action is tying to a dialog form, so when the form is completed, that's when the person receives the trigger. You would then come over here and work your way from left to right. If you want to exclude or have any exclusion rules, you would set those here. You then have a trigger list where you can monitor as people are getting entered into this trigger campaign. You then have an email HTML where you can add in your content. So I'm going to go ahead and choose a template that we already have existing just to get some content in here. And then, of course, you can modify once you have the template. So I'm going to take that out, and I'm simply going to type in "Thank you for registering." You can use your HTML designer to change things, move things around. Text, always make sure that you do convert your text. And then, of course, you'd want to test it and make sure that it is rendering properly. At this point, I'm pretty much done with my trigger. Other than finessing the content, making it look and feel the way that I want it to, I have it set up. So I'm going to go ahead and hit Save and Return. And that's going to take me back out. You can see that we're starting to build our campaign. Now the next area, if we look back at our diagram, I just created the trigger confirmation. What I now need to do is I need to create the actual form that it's going to be tied to. So I'm going to go up to the dialogues, and I'm going to click on Wizard. We have our 5-step dialogue wizard, which will help you create a basic dialogue. Step 1, you're going to enter the name of the dialogue. So again, I'm going to use a date. Dialogue type is more for organization. There are a couple that will change the way it renders, such as event registration, Facebook, redirect form. For the most part, you will probably be using eDialog, landing page, survey, or other. So I'm going to go ahead and just do registration form. Folder is for organization, where you want it to exist, and I'm going to put it inside of my training folder. And then you put in a description of what is this dialogue for. Once you have this information, you click on Next, and you go ahead and go to Step 2, which is adding in the fields that will be asked on this form. You can come down here on the left-hand side and choose the fields just by checking the box and then moving them over. We also have a basic info, which will render some standard questions, such as first name, last name, and email. And then contact us, which will also render some standard information. I'm going to go ahead and choose the basic info, and then I'm going to click on Next. On Step 3, you're going to choose the skin, or the look and the feel that will go around the questions. This is the look. You can use our dialogue template library. You can use the email template library for a consistent look that will carry across your emails as well as your forms. You can copy an existing dialogue, copy an existing skin, or have no skin if you maybe plan to use it in an iframe on your website. For our purpose of today, I'm going to use the dialogue template library, and I'm going to choose a dialogue and click on Next. If you use a dialogue template, then you do get to go to Step 4, where you get to choose the theme, which is the colors for the background, primary colors, as well as the on-page background. If you have those changed and decided, click on Next and go to Step 5. Step 5 is where you're saying, what is the text going to be on the button the person clicks on? Do you want it to be Submit, Register Now, Click to Download, Go to Next Page? It can be anything that you want. So I'm going to put in Register Now. Do you want to place them in a trigger email? This question right here is the tie between the form, the completion of the form, and the trigger. So at that point, I would have to say yes. Upon completion, I want them to receive this particular trigger email. There's my training confirmation. And then I tell the system, after they hit submit, do you want them to go to a thank you page or do you want them to go to your website? Once your decision is made, click on finish and you'll be taken inside of the dialog properties. Now there's a lot of options, a lot of features, and a lot of functions within the dialog itself. You can add in some lead routing. You can test. You can add in some subscriptions. You can use the itty-bitty and the social networking. These are not going to be talked about on today's call. So if you are interested in knowing more about these advanced features and functions, you can watch the recorded video available on the Learning Management Center, or you can join us next week for a live presentation on the eDialogs. For our purpose today of just creating this nurture campaign, we are done. We have our form, we've tied it to the trigger, and now we're going to go through the process of creating these 4 emails. So I'm going to go ahead and come up here and click on Save and Return. I'm then going to go back up to the Marketing tab, and I'm going to click on Drips. Again, that's where we started. We're creating a drip campaign. Here's my training, so I'm going to go ahead and click on Open, and it takes me to the submenu. On this submenu, I'm going to go ahead and finish setting up my initial touch. Initial touch is right here. This is the very first email that would go out. I'm going to open it up, and it's going to take me to the Email Designer. Email Designer inside of an email campaign and a drip campaign are pretty much exactly the same. So I would add in my subject line. I'm going to say, you're invited to attend. Again, that can be anything of your choosing. You can set who it's coming from. You would set the date and time that it's going to be going out. If the date and time come to pass, this campaign does not magically activate. You do still have to go through the process of clicking on Save, Review, and Send. You can see that this date and time is in the past, but it's still sitting here in save mode. You then have all the different options that you can use. You can do the A/B testing. You can do a text-only campaign. A/B testing is highly recommended for drip campaigns because, again, you never know what entices a person to open and engage with your email. It could be the date or time that it goes out, or it could be the subject line or the content. If you're newer to marketing automation emails, then A/B testing is something that you will definitely want to try and see if you get better results with a personalized subject line versus a question subject line. Or maybe you want to try the layouts. Maybe you want to have one of the layouts look like a letterhead and the other one be a little bit more dynamic. Give it a try. You'll be pleasantly surprised sometimes with the results of which one actually does better. Again, we're working our way from left to right. So we're here with the email info. Once you have this information completed, you go to the Send To tab. Send To tab is where you're going to choose who your recipients are actually going to be. You can choose to send to your entire database. You can choose a segmentation or a distribution list or previous campaigns. Since this is our very first touch, I would probably either be sending to my entire database or I'd be choosing from a segmentation or a distribution list. Because this is a test campaign and I am actually going to activate it, I'm going to come down here to additional emails and simply add myself in there one time. I'm going to go ahead and scroll up, and we're going to go over to our next tab, which is the Email HTML. This is, again, where you add in your content. You can add a template, copy a campaign, create it from scratch, many different options to get your creative in here. For time's sake, I'm simply going to add in a template. I'm going to use the same template that we used in our confirmation. Again, you can customize it in here. I'm going to say, click here to register. Again, you can use your HTML designer to change the look and the feel, make it big, make it bold, do anything that you choose here. Now, I put click here to register, but there's no link tying to the dialog yet. We created our trigger. We created the tie between the trigger and the dialog. Now we have to create the tie between the dialog and the initial invite. I do that by getting the dialog URL and hyperlinking it somewhere or multiple places inside of my layout. Where I get that is up here in the right-hand corner, we have Merge Fields. When I click on Merge Fields, it's going to open up another page. On this page, I'm going to click on Dialogues, and you're going to get a list of all of your dialogues. This is a perfect example of where unique naming conventions will come into play. You see how many different dialogues that we have, which is a lot. Because I prefix with a date, I know that I can look in the order, and there it is, 10/31/12 training. Quick and easy to find it. However, if I had named it all demo or testing or Jamie's webinar, and I do 5 webinars a month, it's going to make it very hard to find. So again, unique names make it very easy for you to attach and find your particular dialogues. So I'm going to choose my dialogue. It's going to populate the URL down here, and I would copy it. I take this URL, and I would then hyperlink the text that I want the person to click on. So I'm going to choose my hyperlink manager, which is the little world with a chain, put it right in there, and click on OK. Now it's hyperlinked. So when I send this email out, the person's going to get the opportunity to click there. It's going to open up the dialog page, and they'll be able to register. They complete the registration form. They then get the trigger. So we're starting to create all of these little pieces and tie them together. One of the things, the best practice that I highly recommend is if you do have a call to action where you're wanting the person to click on something, it's nice to have multiple places for them to click on because you never know what the person's actually going to click on. They may want to click on this image because it's an image of a Register Now button. But if they don't download your images from their email client, they're never going to see this image. So that's why it's also good to have your actions as text as well, because they'd at least get to see the text. One of the biggest things to understand when you're designing your layout, especially for nurture campaigns, is how opens and clicks are seen in different email clients. By default, you need to consider your images blocked. So all of these 3 images that I have here, I should consider them blocked by default. So that means that I need to have sufficient text to make up for the lack of images until they download the images. So your text-to-image ratio should be roughly 60% text, 40% images. If you're one of those people who use Photoshop and all you have is one large image, let's pretend this is an image, you're going to have less opens and clicks than if you have additional text enticing the person to engage and download those images. So these are the types of things that you need to keep in the back of your mind as you are going through and designing your different layouts. That, again, is why A/B testing is something I highly recommend, because if you're trying something new, you can see how it does compared to an older design version. Once you're done with the HTML, you, of course, want to come to the text. Come down here and click on Convert HTML. Once that's done, you would, of course, go through the process of testing, sending tests to anybody who needs to see them. Always send a test with encoding. If you plan to manually forward it to another person, make sure you send a test without encoding to prevent cross-cooking. Utilize our Spam Assassin, utilize our Submit to Preview, and utilize our Submit to Spam test. These are all great tools to help you optimize and increase those open and click-through rates. Once you're done here, you would then go ahead and activate your campaign. Now, you don't have to activate it right away, but in this case, I am going to go ahead and activate it. So I'm going to come here to Save, Review, and Send, and this takes you to your checklist screen. On this screen, you're going to review your information one more time. Do not simply check all the boxes on the left-hand side. Go through it and make sure that you have what you're supposed to have here for the from, the sender, the subject line, and such. If anything seems out of place to us, we will leave the box unchecked, which will require you to manually override it. I do see that this is a time in the past, so if I wanted it to go out right now, I would go ahead and just check the box. If I meant for it to go out maybe in about half an hour or an hour, I would return to the campaign and set that preference. Once everything is checked on the left-hand side, you then would check this campaign is approved right here, and you would have the ability to either add the drip to the queue or pre-process the drip. When you're inside of an email campaign, your options are to return to the campaign or send the email campaign. Because we are in a drip, we get to add the drip to the queue or pre-process the drip. Add drip to queue basically tells the system to go ahead and just get it ready to go and wait until the date and time that it's ready to go out. Pre-process should be used if you are sending to more than 5,000 or so recipients. It does take us a couple seconds to encode and personalize each of those emails. And if you're sending to 100,000 people, it's going to take it just a little bit to get down to poor little Z at the bottom and encode. Pre-processing speeds up that process. We do recommend that if you can, you do it 24 hours in advance. If your campaign is due to go out to 100,000 people in an hour, there is no sense in you pre-processing. I'm going to go ahead and click on Add Drip to Queue, and that's going to go ahead and send my campaign out. You can see that it took me out to the email campaign status, where I can go ahead and watch the campaign as it goes out the door. So looking here, we have now created our initial webinar invite. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to go ahead and create my first follow-up subject swap. Again, subject swaps are great to do because it allows you to reach back out to people who did not engage for some reason and try a different tactic to see if you can get them to engage. So I'm going to come back here, and I'm going to go back to my drips. I'm going to open up my training, and it's going to take me to the submenu. So we have our initial, we have our trigger, but now in this middle section, I'm going to create my follow-up. So I'm going to select New in the upper right-hand corner here, and it's going to take me back to the email designer. So here, you'd go ahead and enter your name. I'm going to call this Training Follow-Up 1. Again, it can be named anything of your choosing. And then enter subject line. I call these subject swaps because, again, you never know why somebody did not open your email, but trying a different subject line could potentially entice somebody who didn't open the first one. So if your first one was maybe about inviting them to a webinar, maybe the second one should be tying your webinar to a current event, such as the presidential election. Try different tactics. You never know what will actually work. I would also try different dates and times. So if your first one went out on a Tuesday at 9 a.m. Eastern, try sending out on a Thursday at 1 p.m. Eastern and see if you get different results. Come over here to the Send To tab. I'm going to go ahead and do this one. I'm going to type in your personal invitation to our webinar. Now, previously, we sent to a list, or we sent to the entire database, or we sent to a couple people. For the follow-ups, you're going to be sending to people based on lack of action. And that is chosen down here on the left-hand side where you have campaign responses. Click on campaign responses, and you would find your first campaign. So here is our initial drip training campaign. I would check that box, and down here we have a drop-down that says send to everybody in this campaign that opened but may not have clicked, or opened and clicked, or did not open. Since this is a subject swap and I'm sending to people who did not engage with my first one, I would say did not open. And then you click on Include. You can also mix and match these actions, so you can say not only do I want to send to people who did not open, but maybe I also want to send to people who opened but they didn't click, which means that there's no way they could have registered for my webinar, and include them in there. You would then go through the same processes that we did in the initial. We would add in our content. With subject swaps, it's very easy to copy a campaign. Most of the time, you're not changing too much in the actual design or layout. You're more changing the subject line and the dates and times. I just copied my campaign to make it quick and easy. You can see that it brought over my hyperlink, brought over my text, and again, I'd go through the process of testing it and sending it out. With follow-ups inside of Drips, even if you activate it today, if I'm saying that this is not going to go out until November 7th at 5 p.m., it will not query against my send to list until November 7th at 5 p.m. So it gives people sufficient time to open and click, or not open and not click, on your previous campaign. Drip campaigns are great in the fact that you can get everything set up, activate everything, and just sit back and watch it go. There's no reason for you to have to come back in here unless you need to. So I could technically hit Save, Review, and Send, and activate it, and it would wait until November 7th at 5 p.m. and then query against my Send To. I'm going to go to hit Save and Return, and let's look back at our visual diagram. So we've created our initial, we've created our first follow-up, and now what we're going to do is we're going to create our second follow-up. Now some people might say, wouldn't this increase my unsubscribe rate, trying to send the same message to the same people even though they're not engaging? And the answer to that would be, not really. If you are giving people sufficient time to forget about the first campaign that you sent them, you're trying a different subject line, a different tactic, you're more likely to increase your open and click-through rates than you are your unsubscribe rates. Now, if you're sending your initial invite today, you're sending your follow-up tomorrow, and then your second follow-up the day after tomorrow, yes, you're going to have a higher unsubscribe rate. You're not giving people enough time to forget about your campaign, and instead they're looking at you as spam. What I usually do is I would wait between 3 and 5 days in between each of these follow-ups. People are more likely to forget about it within 24 hours, and that way when they receive it again, 3 to 5 days later, they don't recall ever receiving the first one. If for some reason you do start to see your unsubscribe rates go up, as you send out more subject swaps or follow-up campaigns, then it's time to step back and evaluate how close are you sending them together and what kind of content, are you changing the subject line, etc. And that will be talked more about on Friday's call about analyzing your e-marketing results. So let's go ahead and create our second subject swap. Now we're still here within the submenu underneath the follow-up campaigns. Now you can create a new one, or you can use our quick copy feature. Either way works. I'm actually going to create a new one. I'm going to go ahead and enter my subject line. So I'm going to again put in today's date. We'll put in training, and we'll put in follow-up 2. Again, try a different subject line. I'm just going to type in different subject here. Try a different date and time. Or if you found that you got really good results on a previous date and time, try doing that. We go over to our Send To tab. And in our very first follow-up, we did it based on action of the initial campaign, which was this one. However, since this is our second subject swap, you can see that there's no link between the follow-up 2 and the initial. Follow-up 1 is linked to the initial. Follow-up 2 is linked to follow-up 1. So here, instead, I would choose my follow-up 1, which is up here, and I would say did not open follow-up 1. Campaign actions should always be based on the email prior to it. And then, of course, I could say opened but did not click as well. Again, I go through the process of adding in my HTML, converting to text, and testing my email. Save and return, and you can see how this campaign is starting to build up. We've now created 4 actions. We have our initial, follow-up 1, follow-up 2, and then we have our confirmation. A good tactic that a lot of people try as they're sending out different follow-ups is they try to create a sense of urgency. So if this is your last follow-up and you're trying to get people to engage and the webinar is next week, say something like, this is your last chance to register, or seats are going quickly, reserve yours today. Again, that's another tactic that you can try and see if it does anything for your open and click-through rates. Looking back here, you can see we have our initial. We have our first follow-up. We have our second follow-up. Then we end communication. If somebody receives all three of these and they don't engage, then at that point it's time to stop, and then you can always use them in another campaign, another drip, another event. You don't want to wear people out just on one type of campaign. Our last one that we're going to create is the follow-up, and this is going to people who did take action on the dialogue. So over here, we're still inside of the follow-up campaign, specific date to specific groups. I select New in the upper right-hand corner, put in a name. Again, I like keeping similar naming conventions. We'll call this one Reminder. We'll say, don't forget, the webinar is tomorrow. Okay? Set your from, your sender, your date and time, and so forth. Go to the Send To tab. Now this one would not be based on campaign responses. This one would be based on our call to action, which is completion of the dialogue form. So we have another area called dialogue responses. Under dialogue responses, we have started, meaning they started the page, or completed. Started can be beneficial in the fact that you can send a last-minute email to people who started or touched your landing page, but they didn't complete it, and say something along the lines of, Dear Jamie, we noticed that you started to register for a webinar but didn't quite finish. Would you like to finish your form to register? So just another tactic that you can try. In this case, I would choose completed, and then I would search for my dialogue name. Again, this is where uniqueness comes into play. If it's not unique, you're going to have a heck of a time trying to find it. Check the box and say include. And now this is going to go to everybody who completed this particular form. You'd go through, again, the same process of adding in the HTML, converting to text, testing, and then activating. Click Save and Return, and you have just created a nurture campaign. You are slowly going down and reaching out to people based on action or lack of action. Maybe this one went to 100,000 people. Then maybe this one went to 75,000 people. Maybe this one went to 40, and then maybe this one went to 30,000. So you're slowly, again, nurturing down, sending to people based on action, lack of action. You're giving them messages that are relevant to what they're doing inside of the system. You would not want to continue sending invites to people who've already registered. So that's why doing it based on responses is quite important. Anything can be turned into a drip campaign. If you have an email that is a one-off email, it's here you go, here's an email, nothing really to it. However, let's say that you send out an email and it's a newsletter. Why not turn that newsletter into a drip campaign and send it out 5 days later to people who didn't open the newsletter to try to get them, again, to engage? You can do this with events. You can do this with webinars. You can do this with newsletters. You can do this with system updates. Anything that you're sending out can be turned into a drip campaign, again, to really try to entice the person to engage. Your drip should always have some type of call to action. It does not have to be going to a form where you're making them complete something. You can give them an asset. You can take them to your website. You can take them to your Facebook page. All of the links inside of these campaigns that you're sending out are specially encoded for the recipient, so that when they engage with it and they click on it, you have then got them cookied. And when you have them cookied, you can track their web activities. They come back and engage later on with your website. All of these opens, these clicks, this engagement with your website based on a cookie can be tied into qualifying a lead and handing it over to your sales team. Qualifying leads is something that will be talked about on a lead scoring class in the near future. If that's something that you're interested in, you can again watch the recorded videos or you can join us for the live training session. Now, from today, you should feel confident to go into your system and create a drip campaign. If you have any questions or concerns, you can always reach out to support@salesfusion.com, or down in your left-hand corner, you can click on Open a Support Ticket, and it will open up an email going to support. Tomorrow, we're going to be talking about taking these efforts to the next level, and we're going to be talking about Nurture Marketing Class 301. We're going to be working with the same visual, but if I scroll up, we have additional items that we can create. Tying to the trigger, we can have a trigger follow-up, then another trigger follow-up, each of these containing their very own call to action tied to another trigger. Marketing automation systems can be as basic or as complex as you want them to, and my job is to make sure that you have the tools to be able to look at this and know exactly how to build it out. I hope that you join us for tomorrow's class. As a last resource, I want to point you to our Learning Management Center, which can be accessed through the Toolbox tab, Learning Management. First time you access, you will need to register and create your own username and password. Your Sales Fusion information will not work here. You do have to register. This is where you can be exposed to our recorded videos, our manuals, our tips and tricks, our best practices. We also have our help manual here, which is an online resource, which is a great reference. And we have some nice quick starts here where you can look at quick start for a drip campaign, how to create the parent campaign, enter the subject line, how to select the recipients, how to do the follow-up campaigns. All this information is here for you to give it a try on your own and get comfortable with it. As always, I thank you for joining me, and I hope you have a great day.